If there was any justice in this fucked up world, Hit the Lights would be a much bigger band. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA. Today I have what I think will be a fun one for you. I'm going to talk about 5 bands that should have been bigger, and for each one of these bands I'm going to talk about 3 things. Can you tell I like outlines? For each one of these bands I'm going to tell you why I like them, why I believe they had potential to be bigger, and then lastly why they did not live up to that potential. So without any further ado, let's get into it in no particular order. First up, Animosity. These guys were, I guess, like technical deathcore death metal band. Like they were playing, I guess, like technical deathcore before that was really a genre. And man, these guys were freak fucking talents. I think they were in like 10th or 11th grade on their first album and maybe like 20 or 21 on their last album. Like when I hear stuff like that, I'm just like, why did I ever even attempt to play music? Like, what was I thinking? When people like this exist, why in the world did I ever think that I was like qualified to play music, right? As far as why they had potential, well, I mean, they were just really fucking good. And in addition to that, they also had a pretty unique aesthetic. Like they had the neon colors and they had that one like hoodie with like the gold on it. They were musically very distinctive, like had a cool look. They played live shows that seemed really cool. They were just so musical. Like I know that's kind of a corny, weird word, but that's the only thing I can think of, especially in this genre where so many of these recordings and songs are just so like sterile and boring and lifeless. That is the exact opposite of Animosity. They just, everything they did felt so like organic and pissed and dynamic. They were smart to go to Kurt Ballou to record what I think is their best album. I mean, like if you want to do like heavy metallic hardcore kind of music that still sounds raw and organic, I mean, he's the guy to go to, right? Like you're stupid if you don't go to Kurt. So as far as why they did not live up to this potential, like they were literally children, like I said, you know, I mean, they're in high school. Maybe they didn't care about like being successful. Even if they did, I'm sure they had no fucking idea what they were doing as far as that goes, because who does when they're 16? And you know, honestly, even if they did, like they were so ahead of their time. I think people just had no fucking idea what to make of them. You know, there are a couple bands like them and Abacab that were just kind of in Dead to Fall, that were just kind of a few years too early. And if they had come out in maybe 2009 or 2010, I think they would have crushed, but they didn't. So yeah, I don't know. That's band number 1, Animosity.
Get away from you, just a broken edge, rip all the truth.
Band number 2, 18 Visions. This is one of my favorite bands of all time. I think I'm officially the number 1 18 Visions fan of all time. I say that because I asked my friend who was in the band, can I be the number 1 18 Visions fan? And he said yes. I want a trophy or something. Like I remember the UFC heavyweight champion Tim Sylvia back in the day people would always make fun of him because he would wear his belt to like the grocery store and stuff. I want a fucking 18 Visions fan belt, and I'm gonna wear that motherfucker to the grocery store just like Tim Sylvia did. That's how big of a fan I am. So yeah, I mean, I could literally write a book about how much I love 18 Visions and all the like innovative pioneering things they did. They were just so ahead of the curve. They played like deathcore before deathcore was a word. They did like metalcore before anybody else did. They started like the whole fashion core thing. You know, whether you like that or not, the fact of the matter is they were super influential. They went hard rock before all the other heavy bands went hard rock. These guys were just consistently ahead of the curve, and I think that's what held them back. Because you don't want to be the first person to do something. You want to be like the 3rd or 4th person to do it. You want to be like Apple. Apple is never the first to do anything. They just come along, watch everyone else fuck up, and then learn from everyone else's mistakes and just kind of swoop in and take all the money. So that's what a lot of bands did with 18 Visions, and it's not like they were unsuccessful or they flopped or anything like that. They ended up on a major label and they did some big tours. They did well, but I think eventually they just kind of called it a day because it was obvious that this thing was never going to get bigger than a certain level, and you know, just time to call it quits. So yeah, that's band number 2, 18 Visions. Every fucking thing this band ever did was fire. So if you don't like 18 Visions, we are not friends.
We are here to fucking stay. That will never change.
Band number 3, Demolisher from Chicago, I guess. Man, this band was so fucking heavy. Like, to this day, I think the Demolisher EP is like the pinnacle of what they call like beat down or down tempo or whatever. Like, I don't think anybody will ever top the Demolisher EP for that. They're still around. They've put out, I think, 2 or 3 albums, and they're not bad. They just kind of sound like Oceano. I guess it's just lacking the like rawness of the EP that like made it really stand out to me. Like, it had just a little tiny bit of a hardcore edge to it. As far as why they didn't live up to their potential, well, again, they were like literally kids. I think they were 16 or 17 or something like that when they put this out. I gotta show you guys, like, one of my favorite videos of all time is Demolisher practicing in like their mom's basement with their shirts off. They look like they're in 10th grade or something like that. There's no bass player in the video, probably because he's holding the camera. It's so good. Like, I want every band to make a music video like this. So yeah, like I said, I think this EP is like the pinnacle of this genre. I'm hoping that in 10 years people like worship this EP as some sort of underground classic, you know, like they do some of these old metal bands like the Hellhammer demo or something like that, that like not that many people had back in the day, but was sort of rediscovered later on and became worshipped as a classic. So yeah, here's hoping that Demolisher is the next Hellhammer.
A few words of advice for you, always live your life without restrictions.
Band number 4, City Lights. One of my favorite pop punk bands of all time. Some of my very good friends. I've known these guys for like 10 years. Man, City Lights, such a sad example of a band who just never quite made it over the hump. They did almost everything right. They had great songs. They were like, you know, good looking guys, which, you know, in pop punk that matters. They worked hard. They had a good network. They just kind of never caught a break. And man, it's so frustrating because it sucks when you see a band that's doing so many things right and it just never clicks. Like, the only thing I could say where maybe they made a mistake was, I know they did a lot of like kind of weird tours where they would play, you know, a VFW hall in Atlanta with some kind of obscure band like Freshman 15 or something like that. Nothing against Freshman 15, they were a good obscure pop punk band, but they were just that, an obscure pop punk band. These guys needed to be direct support for some bigger band like A Day to Remember or something like that that would like be their opportunity to kind of break out of the sort of mid-level where they were at. But you know what? It worked out okay. Cam and Ashi are now in Beartooth. Beartooth are fucking awesome, and without being in City Lights, they wouldn't have been able to be in Beartooth. But you know, sometimes that's the way it works out. Sometimes you may fail at one thing and you're bummed, but that thing ends up being a stepping stone to another thing that's even better than the thing you failed at. I said things so many times, I don't know if that made sense. And also Chase from City Lights, very good friend of mine. He has an agency called Electric Eye with our friend Chase. So yeah, the good news is everybody who was in City Lights is doing very well for themselves. I'm stoked for them. If you like pop punk and you have not listened to City Lights, you are missing out, my friends.
She's only set out to burn you, when you know you better hustle, come on, drop the girl.
And band number 5, speaking of pop punk, is Hit the Lights. And before I talk about Hit the Lights, can we just take a minute to like reflect on the fact that so many like pop punk or pop type bands back then had the word lights or skyline in their name? What's the deal with that? Like, Show Me the Skyline, Stereo Skyline, Hit the Lights, City Lights, you know, it's just, what's the deal? Anyway, so Hit the Lights, pop punk band from, I think, Troy, Ohio, I don't know. Been around since like 2003 maybe, and they're actually still around. They still play shows. They just put out an EP fairly recently that was really good. These guys have always just been like one notch ahead of the rest of the pack, in my opinion, in pop punk. Like, better players, better production, better songs, better vocalists. Like, they're just better than everybody else in the genre, in my opinion. And kind of the same thing as 18 Visions. Like, it's not like they failed or anything like that. They didn't flop. They were a successful, pretty big band. But it just seems to me like they should have been, in my eyes, if I was writing this story, they would be as big as like All Time Low or A Day to Remember. They would be at that level instead of like kind of the next level below that. If I had to kind of point to one thing, it might be that they never really played the boy band game, because at that time in the late 2000s, like all these scene bands, they were essentially boy bands that played heavy music, right? They were just a little bit early for that wave of like serious pop punk bands that came out in like 2010, 2011, like, you know, The Story So Far and Transit and Citizen and all that stuff, where I think they would have fit in really well in that scene. Either way, if there was any justice in this fucked up world, Hit the Lights would be a much bigger band. So there you go, 5 bands that in my opinion should have been bigger, along with my armchair quarterback analysis as to why they maybe didn't get as big as I think they should be. So let me know in the comments, what bands do you think should have been bigger? I would love also your armchair quarterback analysis on why any of the bands I talked about didn't get bigger. So maybe if you guys like this one, I will do another video about 5 bands that should have been bigger. But until then, the number one thing I would love for you to do is subscribe to this channel if you're already subscribed, or for some insane reason you do not want to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, share it with a friend. Anything that you can do to help spread the word would be very much appreciated. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.